Nikola Tesla invented the modern electrical system. He held over 300 patents. But one of the strangest things he ever did had nothing to do with electricity. Every single night, no matter what city he was in, no matter how deep into an experiment he was, Tesla would stop everything and go to sleep at exactly 23:59. Not midnight, not 23:55, exactly 23:59. And when people asked him why, he didn't say it was a habit. He said it was a calculation. Tesla believed that the 1 minute before midnight was the most powerful moment of the day for the human brain. That something happened at that precise threshold between one day ending and another beginning, that no other moment could replicate. He called it the reset point. But that's only the beginning of the story. Because when you look at what Tesla actually did with those sleeping hours, what he experienced, what he saw, and what came out of it, you start to realize this wasn't just a quirky routine. This was the engine behind some of the greatest inventions in human history. Here's how it worked. Nikola Tesla was born in 1856 in a small village in Serbia called Smiljan. His father was a priest, strict, disciplined, and deeply committed to mental exercise. Every morning his father would wake young Nicola before sunrise and make him recite poetry from memory, solve math problems out loud, memorize long passages from books, not because Tesla was struggling, but because his father believed the mind was a muscle that needed daily training. Tesla later said this was where his obsession with mental discipline began, but there was something else going on that his father didn't plan for. From a very young age, Tesla experienced what he described as involuntary visions, bright flashes of light that appeared without warning, detailed images of objects and places that didn't exist yet. He would see them so clearly that he sometimes couldn't tell if they were real. Doctors at the time had no explanation, but what Tesla was experiencing had a name: hypnagogic hallucinations, vivid involuntary images that appear at the border between wakefulness and sleep. Most people experience mild versions of this. Tesla experienced them at an extreme level, at almost any time of day. And instead of fearing them, he learned to use them. By his teenage years, Tesla had developed an unusual ability. He could hold a complete three-dimensional object in his mind and rotate it, examine every angle, test it mentally before ever touching a physical tool. Engineers today call this mental simulation. Tesla just called it thinking. But this ability came with a cost. His mind rarely stopped. Ideas arrived uninvited. Images appeared without warning. Sleep, real, deep, uninterrupted sleep, became difficult almost from the start. This is where the sleep obsession began. Not in a laboratory, not in New York. In a small Serbian village inside the restless mind of a child who saw things no one else could see. By the time Tesla moved to Paris in 1882 to work for the Continental Edison Company, he had already developed the unusual relationship with sleep. He didn't trust it, not because he thought sleep was useless, but because he believed most people were sleeping wrong. Tesla had been quietly experimenting on himself for years, testing how little sleep he could function on, pushing his body to its limits, and carefully observing what happened to his thinking, his creativity, his ability to visualize. And he noticed something that surprised him. When he slept less, but slept at precise calculated times, his mind actually performed better. Ideas came faster, visualizations were sharper, the mental fog that followed long, unstructured sleep was completely gone. So he built a system. Tesla reduced his sleep to approximately 2 hours per night, but those 2 hours were not random. They were timed with near-obsessive precision, and the anchor point of the entire system was always the same. Sleep had to begin at 23:59. He believed the brain entered a different kind of state in that final minute before midnight, a threshold state. Modern neuroscience actually has a term for what Tesla was likely targeting. It's called the hypnagogic state, the brief window between full wakefulness and sleep where the brain produces theta waves. In this state, logical filters drop, pattern recognition accelerates, creative connections that the conscious mind normally blocks begin to surface. Thomas Edison, Tesla's rival, actually used this state deliberately. He would nap in a chair holding steel balls. The moment he fell fully asleep, the balls would drop, wake him up, and he would immediately write down whatever he had just been thinking. But Tesla didn't want just a few minutes of that state. He wanted to enter it at the exact same moment every night, training his brain to arrive at that threshold on schedule. Like setting an alarm, but for a specific state of consciousness rather than a specific time to wake up. In the spring of 1882, Tesla was walking through a park in Budapest with a friend. He was reciting poetry from memory, something he did regularly. When he suddenly stopped mid-sentence, he grabbed his friend's arm. And then, standing completely still in the middle of the park, Tesla described in precise detail a rotating magnetic field, a motor that ran on alternating current. He could see it, fully formed, every component in place, rotating in his mind like a working machine. He hadn't built it yet, he hadn't drawn it yet, but it was complete. This was the moment that eventually gave the world the AC motor, the technology that still powers almost every electrical device on the planet today. And it didn't come from a laboratory, it came from a vision in a park. But this wasn't a random stroke of luck. Tesla had been experiencing these kinds of visions his entire life, and he had noticed a pattern. They almost always arrived at one specific moment, the threshold between wakefulness and sleep, or immediately after waking from a very short rest. This is exactly what the hypnagogic state produces in certain minds. In 1995, researchers at Harvard studied the creative output of people who were deliberately kept in the hypnagogic state, using a technique similar to Edison's chair method. The results were striking. Problem-solving ability increased significantly. Subjects made creative connections they couldn't make while fully awake. Tesla had been doing this instinctively decades earlier. But what made Tesla different wasn't just that he had these visions, it was that he trusted them completely. Most inventors of his era worked through physical trial and error, build it, test it, break it, rebuild it. Tesla considered this a waste of time. He believed if the mental simulation was complete and correct, the physical version would work on the first attempt. And remarkably, it usually did. His mind wasn't just generating ideas. It was running fully functional simulations before a single wire was ever touched. Tesla's mental discipline was extraordinary, but his physical discipline was something else entirely. By the time he arrived in New York in 1884, Tesla was working 18 hours a day, sometimes more. He would enter his laboratory before sunrise and not leave until well past midnight. His assistants struggled to keep up. Some quit within weeks, but Tesla kept going. His diet during these years was extreme by any standard. He gradually eliminated most solid foods. In his later years, he survived almost entirely on warm milk, honey, and vegetable juices. He believed heavy food slowed the brain, that digestion consumed energy the mind needed for thinking. What's surprising is that modern research partially supports this. Studies on intermittent fasting show measurable improvements in cognitive clarity and focus during periods of caloric restriction. Tesla had no access to this research, but he had been running the experiment on himself for decades. His physical routines were equally precise. Every day, Tesla walked between 8 and 10 miles, not for exercise in the traditional sense, but because he believed rhythmic physical movement synchronized the brain. He worked out exact distances, tracked his steps, and refused to vary the routine. But then the body started to push back. In 1895, Tesla's laboratory on South Fifth Avenue in New York burned to the ground. He lost years of work in a single night. The physical and mental exhaustion that followed brought him to the edge of collapse. Doctors warned him he was destroying his health. He ignored them, but the collapse came anyway. Tesla began experiencing extreme sensitivity to light and sound. A nearby camera flash felt, he said, like a physical blow. The vibration of a passing train could leave him unable to function for hours. His nervous system, pushed beyond its limits for years, was beginning to break down. The very instrument he had spent his life sharpening was starting to crack. By the early 1900s, Tesla was living permanently in hotels. No home, no family, no close relationships to speak of, just work, routines, and an increasingly elaborate set of daily rituals that he followed with absolute consistency. He stayed at the Waldorf Astoria in New York for years, then later at the Hotel New Yorker, where he would live until his death. And in every room, in every hotel, The rituals were identical. Before sitting down to eat, Tesla would calculate the cubic volume of his food, every meal, every time. He didn't fully explain why, but his notes suggest he believed precise measurement created a mental order that carried over into his work. He refused to touch other people's hair. He was deeply disturbed by pearls, to the point where he once sent a secretary home because she was wearing a pearl necklace. He would only use exactly 18 napkins when dining, not 17, not 19. 18, because 18 is divisible by 3, and 3 was Tesla's most sacred number. This wasn't decoration. This was architecture. Tesla's entire daily life was structured around the number 3 and its multiples. He walked around a building 3 times before entering. He performed tasks in groups of 3. His sleep system, including the 23:59 bedtime, was part of a larger numerical framework he had built around his day. But then there was the pigeon. In his later years at the Hotel New Yorker, Tesla developed a deep bond with a specific white pigeon he fed daily in Bryant Park. He described her as the great love of his life. When she died, he said something inside him died with her. It sounds eccentric, but it points to something important. Tesla had sacrificed every normal human connection in service of his work. The rituals weren't just habits. They were the closest thing he had to relationships. In 1905, something broke. Tesla had spent the previous decade in a slow, grinding war with J.P. Morgan, his former financial backer, over funding for Wardenclyffe Tower. His grand project, a wireless transmission tower on Long Island that he believed could send electricity and information anywhere on Earth without wires. Morgan pulled the funding, and Tesla, already running on years of minimal sleep and extreme physical depletion, collapsed, not metaphorically, physically and mentally. He checked into a sanitarium, stopped working, stopped communicating with almost everyone he knew. For a man who had defined himself entirely through relentless productivity, this was a complete unraveling. What followed was a years-long descent into paranoia and sensory chaos. Tesla became convinced that other scientists were stealing his ideas. He developed an intense fear of germs, washing his hands compulsively, refusing to shake hands with anyone. His sensitivity to light and sound, already severe, became almost unbearable. He reported hearing thunderstorms from hundreds of miles away. He claimed he could feel the rotation of the Earth. Modern psychiatrists who have studied Tesla's documented symptoms suggest he likely had obsessive-compulsive disorder, combined with a form of sensory processing disorder that worsened significantly under prolonged sleep deprivation. But here's what makes this more than just a sad story. The same neurological wiring that made Tesla hypersensitive to stimulation, the same brain that couldn't filter out noise or light, was also the brain that couldn't filter out ideas. The same sensitivity that eventually broke him was the sensitivity that had powered him. You couldn't have one without the other. Tesla had spent decades treating his brain like a precision instrument, but precision instruments are fragile. Push them past their tolerance, ignore their limits long enough, and even the finest machine will eventually fail. Tesla had found that limit, the hard way. So why did Tesla sleep at exactly 23:59? Because he believed that specific moment, the last minute before one day became another, was when the human brain was most open, most receptive, most capable of the kind of thinking that normal waking life makes impossible. Was he right? Modern neuroscience is still catching up to some of what Tesla practiced instinctively a century ago. But what's certain is this: Tesla didn't leave genius to chance. He engineered it. Every single day. Down to the last minute. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.